Hi, today's lecture is going to be about human resources strategy and performance. So let's talk about strategy first. The strategic management process is defined, broken down into several steps. First, you have to come up with your strategy. In order to come up, and we're talking about corporate strategy, so this is kind of a top-down approach. So in order to come up with a good strategy that fits your company and that fits the business environment, you have to perform a SWOT analysis. We'll have a little bit more later on that, but just briefly, a SWOT analysis is measuring the internal factors, which are strengths and weaknesses of your company, and the external factors, which are the opportunities and threats. And then you match those, the internal and the external, and you come up with a good strategic plan. So what's the basic management process in planning? So first you have to come up and set some goals. Then you perform a forecast in which you try to calculate different scenarios which are likely to help you achieve your goals. You review the different scenarios, and then you come up with your plan and implement the plan. Eventually, at the end of a specific period, you will also do a review and see if you have achieved your goals or if you need to make adjustments. Another step you have to take when you do strategic management processes is you have to come up with policies and procedures, and we are going to focus on the human resources policies and procedures. So let's look at the hierarchy of goals when it comes to setting company strategies. So it's, again, this is a more or less a top-down approach. So the president's office, for example, in this case, says we want to double our revenue to 16 million in the fiscal year of 2012. So now it trickles down to the next level, to the vice president level. So you have the vice president of sales and vice president of production. Of course, they have to determine how many more people do they need to hire when it comes to human resources to achieve this increase in sales. And the production department, which is not mentioned here, would have to decide what they have to hire in order to come up with enough supplies or products and services to be delivered in order if that goal gets increased to 16 million. For us, the human resources tab is most important. That's what we're focusing on. The sales team has already identified they want to hire 4 new salespeople. So the recruiting manager now looks at candidates and identifies or attracts 20 new good sales candidates. Out of those 20 candidates, they would most likely pick 4 because 4 is how many they need to fire. But they want to have a good pool to choose from. And then you also have the training manager, and the training manager could set a goal, train 6 new salespeople and retain all others within 4 months. So there needs to be some kind of training. In this case, they decided to increase sales revenue, right? What kind of sales training can they provide to the employees, to the existing employees and the new employees? Let's just briefly look at the strategic management process. So first you define the current business, what it is. You perform an external and internal audit, and I'll get to that in the next slide or two. Then you formulate a new direction, translate the mission into strategic goals, formulate the strategic goals to achieve the goals, implement them, and then evaluate the performance. So let's look at the SWOT analysis with generic examples. So first, again, the strengths and weaknesses are internal. Those are the areas that a company has control over. If they see they lack something, they can add something. If they see they are really good at something, they can get even better at something. So again, internal factors are those that the company has control over. And here are some examples: potential strength, market leadership. Maybe this company is the leader in its field, right? Strong research and development, high quality of products, cost advantages. Maybe they're the low-cost leader. Patents, any intellectual property that they have acquired that they have an advantage of using. For example, tech companies often have the advantage of holding patents that they have the exclusive right to use in the marketplace for 20 years. Usually that's what patents are good for, right? So those are all potential strength a company could have. Weaknesses could be maybe they have a large inventory and they need to get rid of an inventory. And inventory is good to have in one way, but if you have too much of it, you are kind of wasting resources. You're wasting space because inventory needs to be stored somewhere. You might fall into you might have problems getting rid of your inventory because maybe consumer demands are changing. Imagine you have inventory in a fashion clothing line and you have too much inventory and now the season is changing or the trends are changing. How are you going to get rid of your inventory? Very often you just have to sell it at a lower cost, sometimes even at a loss. Excess capacity for a market, you have more than the market demands, right? Management turnover, when you have managers leaving the company. Actually, any employee turnover can be a weakness for a company. Weak market image, maybe the market doesn't look at you as the go-to company because you may have tarnished your reputation for one reason or another, or lack of management depth. Again, these are only examples. There are a lot of other strengths and weaknesses a company could have. Now let's look at the external factors, those that a company does not have control over, but they can use those by working with those. So especially the opportunities. So potential opportunities could be for a company to go into a new market or a new overseas market. Maybe trade barriers between countries are falling. So it's going to be easier to go into another foreign market. If a competitor is failing and not doing well, there's an opportunity to grab customers from the failing competitor. Diversification is when a company diversifies its product offerings. So there's an opportunity. Maybe there's a new trend that consumers are demanding, and the company has the capability of diversifying its products or services to fulfill that new trend. The economy is doing well or rebounding, right? That there's a great opportunity when consumer spending increases and you're selling consumer products. That means there's a huge opportunity there, right? Let's look at the threats. Market saturation means when the market is already saturated, there are already enough products of a kind out there that the demand has pretty much been satisfied. Let's say there's a small town that has 3 pizza places, and daily the people that live in that small town demand a total of 300 pizzas, and each competitor already produces at least 300 pizzas, at least 100 pizzas a day. So that means that demand has been satisfied. The market has been saturated. There has been enough produced already. That's potentially a threat, right? Threat of takeover. Sometimes a larger company might come and want to take you over, and yes, you can always say no. You're not for sale. But honestly, in the corporate way, the way it works, as long as a takeover is not blocked by the government due to specific laws to prevent monopolies. If the price is right, if a company offers a certain price for a company or for its share, the company will most likely sell. And sometimes there are also hostile takeovers. But anyway, in any case, this is a threat. Another threat could be low-cost foreign competition. A lot of times we have competitors that are able to make products for less money and bring them into our country and sell them for less. So that's a threat, definitely. Slow market growth. Maybe the market isn't really growing as fast. And growing government regulations. Government regulations can be a pitfall sometimes, in which if a new regulation comes up, let's say you're selling food products, and a new regulation comes up where you are not allowed to use a specific ingredient any longer. So now you have to redesign your product that it does not have that ingredient, and sometimes it's not as simple as just, oops, we're just going to leave that out, right? So anyway, this is a SWOT matrix. It's also referred to as a SWOT analysis. It's very important for a company to do that in order to understand where they are in the marketplace. Let's look at type of strategy at each component level. You have corporate strategy. What business are we in? What are we doing? What is our main thing, right? And then here are some, this is just saying we have 3 different businesses. They will think about, how are we going to compete, right? There are different ways you can compete. You can compete on pricing. You can compete on differentiation. You can compete on the breadth of the products that you offer. There are all kinds of different ways a company can distinguish itself from the competition, right? And at the next level, at the functional level, you come up with your functional strategy, where the sales department would decide would figure out, how do we support that strategy? If we're going with a competitive strategy of low price, most likely sales is going to be increased. That means, okay, in sales we have to hire more salespeople, like we saw a few slides ago, or we have to that's usually what the sales department would determine, right? The production department would determine, how do we support the business's competitive strategy? How do we make more products now, because we're planning on selling for, and for us, for HR, how do we support the business's competitive strategy? Do we need to hire more people? How many people do we need to hire? How much more training do we provide? And so forth. So let's talk about managers' roles in strategic planning. So we have to come up with a plan, obviously, and obtain competitive intelligence, meaning what is our competition doing, right? What are they doing? What can we do to match that? Or even better, what can we do to offer something better? And then we identify our strengths and weaknesses, which is part of the SWOT analysis, and participate in communicating that company-wide, not only company-wide, but also communicate that to the market and to the potential consumers. What is strategic human resources management? Again, very similar. You have to first formulate a strategic plan, right? Which is kind of trickled down based on what the corporate plan or the first level plan is, and how do we fit in, right? Then we have to ensure employee competencies and behaviors. Do we have the right type of employees to achieve the strategic plan? If not, can we do something? Can we hire more people to make up for the lack of competencies? Can we train employees who potentially would have competency, could have those competencies? And behaviors, how do we get employees to behave a specific way? All of this is related to human resources strategies, policies, and practices. So those are the nuts and bolts of human resources departments, right? What are our strategies? What policies are we going to enforce? And what are our general practices? And we'll go on about that in the next slide. So let's look at the HR strategy model here. In this way, we're talking about, again, employee competencies and behaviors are required for a company to achieve these strategic goals. So looking at the whole, all the different areas of human resources, we are at area 1, strategic and legal environment. We are going to dig further into the other areas in future chapters. So planning, recruitment and selection, training and development, compensation and other rewards, and employee and labor relations. So let's look at the strategy map. So in brief, in this case, we have an example of the company wants to be the low-cost leader, offer great customer service, and operate efficiently, right? So, and the financial results will hopefully be profitability. So, but all of this starts at the bottom, where we look at what are the employees doing, right? they have a direct impact on whether the goals can be achieved, right? Let's go to the bottom. Organizational and employee capabilities, they're required to support the desired internal business processes. So this was an example of an airline that wants to achieve higher profitability, wants to be the low-cost leader and be efficient and so forth, right? So at the bottom, you have to have a highly engaged crew, or in this case, they talk about the ground crew, right? And supportive high-performance human resources practices. So you can look at human resources as a profit center. There's something called analytical HR. So, we have analytics in all areas of business analytics, and human resources is part of the business analytics, right? How are we doing? Human resources is considered a capital investment, right? Just like you have other resources, you have natural resources, you have financial resources, you also have human resources. Your workforce is a big resource and valuable resource that helps your organization achieve its goal. You have talent value and supply chain models actually, I won't go into that, but I encourage you to read that in detail in the chapter, right? So the next topic is human resources audits. Why do we need to do audits? We need to make sure that we are on par with everything, that we are doing the right thing, that we are efficient, that we're complying with laws and so forth. So some of the important things to address when you do an audit is you look at the roles that people have in the organization and do a head count, including what are the job descriptions, are employees categorized exempt or non-exempt? In other words, are they hourly paid employees, or are they management or salaried employees? How many full-time versus part-time employees we have? Are we complying with federal, state, and local employment laws? How is our recruitment and selection process? Are we using the right tools? Are we doing the right background checks? Are we recruiting diversity and so forth? What about our compensation? What is our pay, our policies? Do we have incentives? Are they fair? Are they useful? Are they valuable to our employees? What are our employee relations like? Do we have any agreements with unions? What are our disciplinary procedures if we have problems? Do we recognize employees for jobs well done? And then there are mandated benefits that we have to make sure we are in compliance with, such as Social Security, unemployment, workers' compensation, and so on. And then we have group benefits such as insurance, time off, and any other benefits. So that's part of an HR audit. Another important part of an HR audit is payroll. Are we legally complying with payroll? Are we processing payroll properly? On time? Are we compensating everybody fairly without any discriminatory practices? And are we keeping documents and records? For example, do our files contain information such as resumes, applications, offer letter, evaluations, what benefits is the employee enrolled in, and so forth? Were there any issues, any disciplinary actions taken against the employee? All of this has to be documented and kept in the employee file. Another part of the human resources audit is HR training and development. Do we have a good new employee orientation and training in place? What about technical and safety safety training, career planning, and so on? Employee communication, employee note, such as handbooks, newsletters, recognition programs, even memos that are sent out. And then how about termination and transition policies and practices? So all this is part of an HR audit. A lot of companies today are practicing evidence-based HR, and this comes back to analytics again. It's based on research and data, right? It's based on evidence. It's not based on anecdotal saying, oh, this I know this person who worked here and they had this type of recognition plan, which really didn't work because this employee never got recognized. That's anecdotal. But if we say, if we do research, find out that if we have data that says a large amount of employees who are part of this recognition plan showed 10% improvement in productivity, now we have data that substantiates the decisions that we make based on that data, right? They're objective, and they have to be objective and realistic. You also have to do experimentation on a small scale. So start small and see how it works, and then grow from there. And you come up with models that predict what outcome you might have. Prediction models are often used in sales departments when they predict how much sales increase they can have in a future period. Building high performance work systems. So you have to have a work system that performs well. In order to do that, you have to implement good work practices. Some of the things you can do to build a high performing workforce is you have to pay employees better, train them better, have sophisticated recruitment processes in place, and have more self-managed work teams rather than a work team where a manager has to overlook over everyone's shoulder, make sure they do everything the way they're supposed to, and so forth. So self-managed work teams are basically teams where employees are empowered to make decisions. So they don't have to constantly ask a manager what to do. You come up with human resources metrics. These are the metrics that we implement and we're benchmarking, right? Employee engagement is why is it important? It's important because the more engaged employees are, the more they feel part of a system, and the more they feel empowered to make decisions, right? What can managers do to improve employee engagement? By empowering them, by talking and communicating with them, by engaging them in making decisions, by having open communications channels, and so forth. And how do you measure employee engagement? That's a long-term project, of course, ongoing project, but there are specific tools you can use to measure employee engagement. You can do employee focus groups, you can do get their feedback, ask for anonymous feedback, and so on. There are some more mentioned in the textbook, so please do not skip reading the chapter. So just one example, Kia Motors had some problems, right? And they improved employee performance. The challenges they had was they lost sales. There was a lot of global competition, and there was a 31% turnover, which is quite high turnover in employees and management, right? So these are the 6 steps they implemented to improve employee engagement. They set measurable objectives. What is a measurable objective? So an objective not measurable would be if you tell your team of salespeople, I want you to sell more next year. I want you to sell a lot more next year. How are you going to measure it? If one salesperson sells 10 products, more could mean 11 products, or more could mean 20 products. It has to be measurable, right? So you could say, I want you to sell 10% more next year. Now the salesperson knows, instead of having 10 new customers, I need to recruit 11 new customers next year. So, and that is measurable. At the end of the year, they will measure how many more customers were recruited. Another thing that they did was they provided leadership development. So you don't have to be a manager to benefit from leadership. Leadership development could be on all levels. Even I hate to use the word lower level, but the bottom ground employees can benefit from leadership development, and how to engage with coworkers, how to engage with yourself, how to engage with customers, and so forth. Employee recognition programs worked well for them. They recognized employees who did well. And improved internal communication, they created employee development programs and examined compensation and other policies to make sure that compensation plans are fair and that policies are not too rigid, but rigid enough to, especially when you're making products such an automobile to make sure that things like safety and employee safety and product safety is still a top priority, and then create policies that are fair and make sense. Just in summary, strategic planning is important to all managers. Each function or department needs its own functional strategy. The manager will want to gather and analyze data prior to making decisions. So data, again, is very important. Only with true data will you make better decisions. High performance work systems is a set of HRM policies, and employee engagement is important, and HR strategy, as we discussed, involves 6 steps. So that's it for this chapter. Thank you for listening.